Hello everyone, and welcome to the Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Old buildings, old houses. There's something about them that makes us go, that place is definitely haunted. Maybe it's the structure itself, a slightly dilapidated building, poorly lit with that dim yellow lighting that's not quite enough to see things clearly. But what I think it really comes down to is history. If we believe in the idea of ghosts, spirits, basically if we believe in the afterlife, then surely we understand that there was a life before. It only makes sense that the longer a home or building exists, the higher the chances that just more in general has happened. More lives lived and lost. More energy. Naturally, this doesn't mean that everything haunted is scary. The word haunted may imply that, but sometimes the spirits are kind, or moreover, maybe they don't even engage, while others make it their afterlife's mission to be involved with the living. Both experiences make for a great story. So, let's get started, shall we? This happened October 5th, 2008. I remember the day since we were on our way home from my cousin's wedding, and my sister's baby shower was the next day. My husband and I left the wedding around 10 p.m. As family weddings go, it was a long day. We didn't drink alcohol since we knew we had a lot to do the next day and drive home. Preface: the wedding was hosted in a town that we're familiar with, and the story is based on roads that we've driven 1,000 times, in the dark and in the daylight. This is fall in a small, quaint, northeastern town. My husband is a non-believer and never agreed with my point of view on ghosts or spirits, but we've made it work. We leave the wedding and are driving home. My mind is filled with how late it is and how much I have to do tomorrow to get the shower set up. I'm really hoping everything is perfect and that I haven't forgotten to prepare anything. As we make a left to go up a small incline, I see this mist off to the right. It's about 5 foot, swirling up, and approximately 8 feet into the yard. My brain automatically shoots over to, that's weird. Why is a storm drain in the middle of a yard? It looked very similar to the condensation one would see from a New York City vent, moisture that most of us know and are familiar with when the ground is warmer than the air. I'm still hyper-focused on why this drain is in the middle of the yard, so as we drive by, I look to the ground where the mist is hovering. As I'm looking down into the yard, trying to see the drain, my husband yells. Yes, yells.
"Oh my God! Did you see that?"
He curses all the time, but up until that point that I have known him, he's never yelled, "Oh my God," before. Shocked, I reply, "What? That strangely placed drain?" Shakily, he replied, "No, that lady." I didn't see a lady. I was looking. She was see-through, wearing old-fashioned clothing, standing there in the yard. You were looking out the window. That's when I realized the mist he saw was potentially a ghost, and the mist I picked up on as strange placement for a storm drain were one and the same. What was it? Condensation or a ghost? After this, my husband has never spoken of it again, or repeated what he saw. Super frustrating at times, but I respect that he does not want to discuss it. The first time I mentioned this experience to my sister, he got superbly upset that I had said he said, "Oh my God." I know he said it, since it's something he never said before around me. The tone of what he said made it stick in my mind forever. We went back through there the next day. No Halloween decorations, no drains, nothing that we could find to explain what we saw. We've driven that road time and time again. There are no storm drains, no sidewalks, about 18 inches of gravel shoulder. When I'm a passenger riding through there, I still to this day try to find the oddly placed storm drain in the middle of someone's yard. I find it fascinating that we both picked up on it as something out of place. My rational mind said storm drain, while my husband decided something else had made him look right at it. Whatever it was, ghost or condensation, it's been a fun campfire story to tell. More than 20 years ago, my then wife and I took a trip to Savannah. We stayed in a bed and breakfast that was comprised of 2 large townhouses, separated by a beautiful, lush garden. The innkeeper told us stories of strange happenings that occurred in the building. Of course, just about every bed and breakfast is quote-unquote haunted, as that tends to increase the appeal with the kind of person who likes to stay there, myself included. The inn was built in the 19th century, and it sits in the beautiful historic district close to Forsyth Park. Savannah is supposedly a very haunted city, with ghost tours and ghost stories galore. If you spend time there among the old houses and moss-draped trees, it's easy to start seeing ghosts. The inn is beautiful, and thinking back, it might have been the second time that we stayed there. It's my favorite place in Savannah, and it was always a wonderful experience. The staff was very friendly and professional. I don't necessarily enjoy chatting with other guests, but I do like to talk to the staff. The room that we were staying in had a little balcony overlooking the street. We went out there after dinner, and within 30 seconds, a very large flying beetle smacked right into my forehead. Okay, time to go inside. We didn't experience anything ghostly or unusual at all that evening. But the next morning, the bathroom had a nice clawfoot tub with a shower curtain around it. I was showering the next morning in the tub, and when I stepped out, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the mirror, and my heart almost leapt out of my chest. The mirror over the bathroom sink was covered with a light coating of condensation, but I could still see my face clearly reflected. The odd thing was that my eyes appeared almost completely black. The effect was, for lack of a better word, demonic. It was my face, but the eyes were downright terrifying. When I overcame my initial shock, I took a closer look in the mirror. I figured out that although the features of my face were reflected accurately, for some reason the pupils of my eyes were hugely magnified, so that in the reflection, they appeared to fill the entire diameter of each eye. The effect was really frightening. I examined my reflection, trying to determine why this was happening, but I couldn't. I didn't, and I still don't understand how this worked. I've never seen it before. It's never happened again. I called my wife in to show her, and observed the same thing happening with her eyes. I guess this might not be a real ghost story, but it was really strange and inexplicable. I wish I had a photograph of the effect, but I do not. Has anyone ever experienced anything like that? First, I'd like to apologize because I know this will be long, but I've had many things happen to me, so This first one, it's actually not mine, it's my sister's. I was about 3 years old, and when we were young, we lived in this nice house. And one time, my sister was at the bottom of the stairs. When she looked up, there was a black, misty figure at the top of the stairs. Nothing really ever happened to me until I was about 6 or 7, but I used to live in another house, and I don't know why, but I could not be in this one alone. Every time I was inside alone, I'd get an eerie feeling like something was watching me. In that same house, my mom moved out and she gave the house to my dad, and that's when it really started. Whenever I'd come over at night, me and my stepbrother would be the only ones awake, and we would hear footsteps walking up and down the hallway outside the door, which his mom has recalled hearing too. And then, one night during the summer, I was 10 at the time, and I was the only one awake at 4 a.m. I had to go to the bathroom really bad, and usually we would go together and sit in the hall and wait for each other because it was so scary. I finally decided to get up, and I was in the bathroom when out of nowhere, someone started knocking on the bathroom door, and nobody was awake. I would have heard them get up because the doors creak. A few seconds later, the knocking stopped, and a little girl's voice literally sang a lullaby to me on the other side of the door. After I got back to the room, I was watching a video, and a man said, "Hi," and I heard the same little girl's voice right behind me whisper, "Hello," in my ear. Now, at the house I was living at with my mom when I was 8, I remember one night laying in my bed when right in front of my eyes, I watched my closet door slowly open, and this wasn't like a normal door. They were those folding ones, and part of it was broken, making it even harder to open. Also, back in my dad's house, this happened a few months before they moved. I was walking to the bathroom, and when I turned the corner, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a little boy. Now, at first, I assumed it was my stepbrother, but then I realized that the boy was a bit too short, and he also had dark brown hair, whereas my stepbrother has super bright blonde hair. Now, to the house I'm currently living in. When we moved in, my stepsister saw a little boy walking up the stairs. She thought it was my little brother because they both had blue pants. So she yelled, "You can't go up there," to him, but he ignored her. So my mom went up there to get him, only to find that no one was there and my brother was downstairs. A month before that, when we first moved in, only me and my stepsister were there when we started hearing quiet bangs and whistles. And my stepsister was so scared, she started crying, but I'm used to it, so I went along with it and just started whistling back. Also, when I first moved in, for a year or so, I'd hear high-pitched screaming in the house. Now in the same house, still, about a year or 2 ago, I was in the kitchen when I saw a dark black figure at the front door. And then it moved into the window and completely disappeared. Then, just a few months ago, I was laying in bed trying to sleep, and I have these LED lights on my wall. They used to fall down all the time, so I know what it looks like when they fall. But I moved my blanket, and I watched the lights get full-on pulled off of the wall. That same night, I woke up super early in the morning, and before that, almost every day I'd wake up with my blanket on the floor. But anyway, I woke up and my blanket was halfway under the bed, and when I went to pull it back up, I could feel someone trying to pull it away from me. What I'm about to say just happened yesterday. I was in bed on my phone, and my TV remote was on my bed to my right. Out of nowhere, a white light flashed to my right, and it didn't light up the room either, just right next to me. It only lasted half a second, and then my TV turned on. Then a few hours later, my brother was in my room, and I was telling him about it to scare him. It really doesn't affect me when my LED lights change colors out of nowhere. I had them on red, though. And boom, they started flashing all colors. And I just stopped talking. My brother looked so scared and asked if I did it. I said no. This is the last part. This actually happened at my friend's house, which is very haunted, I might add. But I'm constantly feeling like I'm being watched when I'm there, and I just get a bad feeling. But the last time I was there, somebody knocked on the bedroom door, and no one else was up. And then just a few minutes later, a knock-like sound was heard from the window. I'm honestly starting to think that it might just be me who's being followed everywhere I go by spirits, because no matter where I go, something creepy happens. Earlier this week, I was walking my dogs alone at 11 p.m. I know, late. At the exit of my neighborhood, I saw a deer across the road, and I started walking towards it. I saw an SUV come down the road and stop to look at the deer on the side of the road, but it was very strange because he turned around to go back the way he came, and he was staring at me from his car and partially hanging out of his window. I did not make eye contact, and I walked away, so I didn't get the best identifying descriptions. As the car was leaving, he made 2 U-turns and was shining his lights at the deer. I did not stop watching his car. I really only saw the back of it, but I thought he was going to get out and hurt the deer or something. He then drove down the road further, but would keep stopping every few feet. I kept watching, and I didn't turn my back because I had a feeling he was watching me while he was stopping, because at this point, I think the deer had run away. I thought this was a really weird occurrence, and I started walking straight home once his taillights disappeared to tell my family what had just happened. As I was approaching my house, I noticed the same car had now come into my neighborhood and went down the road past my house. I had a really bad gut feeling already, and this threw me into a full panic. I ran inside, locked the doors, and called my husband while looking out the window from behind the curtains. Probably 10 minutes passed. It's 11:30 at this point, and my neighbor came home. As soon as their car pulled into the driveway across from mine, I saw the same car leave pretty fast. It seemed like he was maybe waiting, stalking down the road. My husband told me to call the police. When I called the police, I told them I thought it was a Chevy, but all I knew was that it was an older white SUV, and they sent a patrol. While I was waiting, I saw what I believed was the same white SUV fly down the road past my house again. The police came through the neighborhood with their lights on, and as soon as the cops got near my house, the same white SUV drove away. The cop told me he saw a man fitting the description I'd given driving, so he went after him, and I never heard or saw anything since. I've been shaken up about it, and I didn't even go outside yesterday. Luckily, I have 2 cops who live in my neighborhood, but still, a scary thought of what could have happened. I want to give the benefit of the doubt that maybe he was just a neighbor or dropping off a neighbor. But my husband and I have circled our neighborhood a few times over the past couple of days, and I have not seen a car like the one from that night. I'm still hoping that I was just being paranoid from smoking that night, and or grief, stress, because I learned a loved one had died that day. If that man's intentions were what I thought they were, then that's even scarier. I want to believe it was just me panicking, but what do you think about all this? About 30 years ago, I spent several years working in movie theaters in Worcester, Massachusetts. My favorite was the huge old building that had been chopped up into 4 separate cinemas. It had been a beautiful theater back when it was built in 1926 as the Poily Palace. And although it had been semi-destroyed during modernization in the late 50s, there were still many original features of the building that remained. As a manager, I had been issued a big keychain that gave me access to the entirety of the building, and I spent countless hours exploring nearly every part of that building, except the curtain loft, which would have required climbing an iron ladder about 80 feet. Nope. The building had attics and basements and crawl spaces. There was an area in the front of the building on the 2nd floor that had 2 or 3 abandoned businesses that had been walled off. There was a music store and a ballet studio, and maybe an office. There was also a bathroom. Everything looked like it was from the 1940s or 50s, faded wallpaper with ballerina motif, a plie mirror on the wall. In another section of the building was the old manager's office, with high ceilings and crown molding, and a beautiful stained glass window that I believe dated back to 1912 and had previously been part of an adjacent theater. There was still an old safe in the office. I found a newspaper article from 1942, 1944. It detailed an armed robbery when 2 men had tied up the managers in the office and robbed the safe. One of those men was later executed in the electric chair for an unrelated crime. We use the old manager's office to store giant 30-gallon bags of popcorn now. There was a crawl space of sorts under the box office. It was accessible by lifting a hinged plywood panel and climbing over a 4-foot wall. On the other side were the remains of a couple of basement rooms, broken concrete, bricks strewn about. In one of those rooms, I found an old flared Coca-Cola glass in perfect condition. I kept it for years. I also found a deck of cards in a handmade leather pouch with a snap closure fashioned out of a buffalo nickel. There were also old dressing rooms with makeup mirrors and light bulbs. The paint was peeling off the walls in potato chip-sized flakes. As you can surmise, the building was purported to be haunted. The head manager claimed to have had ghostly experiences, so I'll start there, I guess. When the building was remodeled in the late 1950s, the men's room in the basement was converted into a manager's office. One night while closing up, the manager, my boss, made his way up the stairs to the main lobby. As he emerged, something caught his eye. Way up by the ordinate 30-foot ceiling, he saw an apparition floating there. It disappeared into the ceiling. Terrified, he ran back down the stairs and hid in the office until daylight. Another time, he was again working late. There were several arcade machines in the lobby area, and they were normally powered off when the last shows were in. As he climbed the stairs, he heard all of the machines making their electronic bleeps and bloops. He was annoyed that the usher had failed to turn off the machines before punching out, and realized he'd have to go turn them off himself. As soon as he opened the door, the noises stopped dead. Looking across the lobby from where he emerged, the machines were all dark. They were indeed powered off. A projectionist claimed that he looked out of the booth window one night in the big theater upstairs, and while shutting things down, he saw a face looking in at him. I take those stories with a grain of salt. I was always skeptical of those based on the sources. So here's my experience. I was obsessed with the history of the building, and I'd researched newspaper archives for articles about it. There were rumors that a stagehand had died there in an accident during the time that it had been a vaudeville theater. I was never able to confirm that. I had talked about the building to my mother, and she in turn happened to discuss it with a friend that she worked with. The woman claimed to be a psychic or clairvoyant, or maybe just that she gets feelings about things. She told my mother that she had been to the theater, and that she felt someone had indeed been killed there, and that his name began with the letter M. My reaction was, okay, sure, she sounds nutty. Sometime later, I was the sole manager on duty on a slow night midweek. I was alone in the office in the basement. The 7 o'clock shows were in, and I was doing some paperwork. The intercom buzzed. It was the box office cashier calling to tell me that I had a phone call. I asked who it was, and she said that she didn't know. I hung up the intercom and pushed the button for the main incoming call that was on hold. The earpiece erupted with sound, close squealing and static. I use the word close because the sound, it was so loud and distinct. I assumed that it was something wrong with the phone PBX in our building rather than the line itself or the caller's phone. It was just the impression I had. "Hello?" I said. Nothing. Just more squealing and static. "Hello?" I repeated.
"Hello?"
A man's voice. Calm, flat, distinct. Then nothing further. "Who is this?" I was a bit perplexed. All the noise on the line and the caller seemingly reluctant to speak.
"This is Mike."
Calm, quiet, not shouting over the noise of the line. Quite audible and clear. Then nothing but the awful squealing and static. I waited a few seconds for the caller to continue. After all, he called me. Presumably, there was a reason. Nothing. "Mike who?" I said, feeling a little impatient. Mike is a common name, and there were 2 Mikes employed there at the time. One of them had a fairly high-pitched voice that sounded nothing like the caller. It didn't sound like the other Mike either. The line abruptly went dead. Silent. The squealing and hissing stopped. I waited. No one called back. I called Sandy, the box office cashier, and I asked her if they had asked for me personally or just to speak to the manager. She said that the caller had asked for me by name. Suddenly, I remembered my mother's friend, a man's name beginning with the letter M. Mike? It never happened again. The phone never made those noises. No one ever confessed to the prank. I never figured out who it was. A couple of years ago, my partner and I moved into a relatively old home that he'd purchased for his parents in a small town in New Hampshire. The house was previously used as separate apartments, so it was broken up into 3 different sections. There was the upstairs apartment, where my partner and I stayed along with 1 roommate. The downstairs apartment his parents lived in, which was also attached to the basement, and they renovated that into a party space where they could host friends and family when they came to visit. That is where the first encounter began. It was the middle of summer, and my partner was inside with some of his family members watching TV in the basement, and I was in the backyard helping prepare some things for dinner. When I went inside to the basement, I heard yelling from both my partner and her other family members. Apparently, a cell phone that had been stored in the purse of another family member went flying out from inside the bag to the other side of the room. As stated in the title, I was and still have a healthy dose of skepticism when it comes to anything related to the paranormal. So naturally, I dismissed the phone as having been on vibrate, and maybe they received a notification which caused it to fall out of the purse. Maybe I should have previously mentioned that my partner's family are pretty big believers, so I figured they were exaggerating at the time. This was the beginning of an assortment of strange events, all of which I was able to dismiss, such as finding pieces of jewelry that I distinctly remember placing in my jewelry box in strange places throughout my apartment. Or like finding necklaces in the kitchen cupboards with our dishware. There were countless times when our cats would stand to attention, and both of their heads would turn, as if watching something pass through the room. Even if they were sleeping, they would suddenly wake and stand to attention, and this would happen every few days or so. Not to mention my partner, roommate, who's a bigger skeptic than myself, and I always had the feeling of being watched ever since moving there. This all came to a head one evening when I was getting ready to shower. I had a sterling silver necklace that I would wear day in and day out. However, whenever I would shower, I would take my necklace off and place it on the back of the toilet. This time, I went to place my necklace on the back of the toilet as always, and it had slipped off the back, and I watched it fall on the floor and land directly behind the toilet. Not wanting to grab the necklace, I decided to leave it there and take my shower. Mind you, the bathroom door was locked, and the cats were inside of the room, so no one was in or out during the time of my showering. Upon getting out of the shower, on the bath mat outside of my tub was my silver necklace, laying in a straight line on the rug, about 4 feet from where it had previously fallen. I came out of the bathroom immediately, and about a half an hour later at dinner, I told my partner and roommate about what had happened. That's when our roommate had told us that a couple of weeks prior, when they were showering, they could have sworn they saw a face looking in from the window in the shower. My roommate was so convinced that they had confronted my partner, thinking that they had been pranking him. But keep in mind, the apartment was on the 2nd story, so there's no way that someone could have had access to that window. Needless to say, we're all firm believers now. This one's always been a fun one to tell. My husband does not believe in the paranormal and thinks it's a bunch of nonsense. At this point, we were still early on in our relationship and had been living together for a couple of years. He bought an old house, built in 1929, in a suburb close to the big city we grew up next to. I would often see the shadows move out of the corner of my eyes and started having a sense that our energy was not the only energy there. Nothing too concerning. We had a 120-pound American black lab, so it could easily be her moving through the house. Or we could explain it away that maybe the neighbors backed in and the lights just hit the windows just right. One day, I tell my guy that I saw a small black shadow walk into the laundry room. I was not taken seriously. Has to be some reasonable explanation. I mentioned it because it wasn't an out-of-the-corner-of-the-eye experience this time. The laundry room is in the finished basement. The only windows are glass block windows with a vent, and they're etched foggy. They're 4 by 3 blocks, I think, whatever the standard basement window size is. This part of the basement, the windows face into our backyard. There's no lights coming in from traffic. The houses were built in an apple orchard, so the backyards were long, about half an acre, and an acre between our house and the house that ours backed up to. We had an 8-foot wooded fence along the property line, no outside light source. A few weeks later, we're getting ready to go to the store together. I was finishing some laundry, and he's in the basement finishing up something on the computer that was down there. He asks me to put the dog in her crate while he finishes up. He will be just a minute longer. The crate is in the basement, but behind, to the right of where my guy is sitting. The laundry room door is open. All the lights are off now except for the hall light on the top of the stairs and the PC. I'm now standing at the end of the stairs facing my guy, and he's looking at the computer. Black Shadow Dog walks into the laundry room. My guy. I thought you put her into her crate. Jokingly. Nah, I thought you were going to. He calls the dog. I'm looking at our dog in her crate. Now, he's losing his patience, since there are things in the laundry room he doesn't want her to eat or get into. Can you please get the dog? What dog? Fine, I'll do it. At this point, I ask him to turn around and look in the crate. Looks at the crate, looks back at the computer. You saw it, didn't you? You saw the black shadow go into the laundry room too. It's the only time he ever admitted that he saw something in that house. Now, I don't know much about shadow beings, never really looked into it. We were in this house for 8 years and we had our kids here. Never anything malicious or scary. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. But don't miss a brand new episode every Friday night. And don't miss my other weekly uploads every Sunday and Wednesday. And don't forget to keep your big scaredy cat eyes peeled for more uploads, not just on my channel, but channels I'll be featured on. So much spooky content coming your way. I want to thank those who shared their stories, and a big thanks to all of you for listening. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to The Darkest Hour if you haven't already, and tap the bell so you never miss a thing. I sure do appreciate all of it, and I can't thank you enough. A huge shout out to all of my patrons whom I appreciate so very much. Monica L, ZOEWATT, Shelly B, Donald C, Rat Girl, ALISHA S, ERIN G, NIKKI H, Mr. Revenant, and Naz K. If you want to support The Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining my Patreon. Check out patreon.com/thedarkesthour or click the link in the description to learn more. Follow me on Instagram @thedarkesthouryt and on Twitter @AmandaJaneTDH. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me. amandadarkesthour@gmail.com or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.